Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today to talk about female genomics, not only what it means, but also about how we might use this as part of our farm business. We've got a wealth of experience on the call today, so I look forward to your questions and conversation as we go through. We are recording this webinar so that people can have a look at it in their own time. Through the session, please feel free to use the chat box to pop some questions through as you have them. It's great to have Leanne Monks and Ali Pereira and Pete Williams with us from DataGene today, and they'll certainly help to keep me on track and interject with some of those questions as they come through. It's my great pleasure also to welcome Sam Simpson to the call. Sam and her husband Mark are dairy farmers near Colac, and Sam has been using this technology for a few years now and has a wealth of experience to be able to share. And it's great, Sam, to have you on board and able to have a chat about how you are using genomics in your business as we work through. So we'll hear from Sam a little bit later, but thanks very much for taking the time to co-host and be the co-pilot today.
No problem.
I suppose if we start with a kind of a broader view of genetics, these two pictures for me are kind of a strong reminder of what the whole genetic space is all about. On the left, there's a picture of my son when he was a couple of years old looking out at the herd. And that's 14 years ago when that photo was taken. And the decisions that we made then are still impacting the herd that my husband and I have in South Gippsland. And so just this reminds us about how important it is to make sure that each decision counts. And trying to make each decision as well as we possibly can, because the impact of that lasts for a long time in our herd. Moving forward a few years, Chris looks a little different, the calves look a little bit different, but the decisions that we made about breeding those calves will be with us for another 14 years in front of us. So we want to make sure that we're doing the best job to make each of those decisions. And really, that's what genomics is all about, helping us to make those good decisions for the long-term success of our herds. Today, we're talking mostly about female genomics, but I think it's good to put this in context. We have seen an enormous investment in research and in development and extension. The work that farmers and breeding companies and genomic service providers and industry have done together over time has means that we are creating a better herd faster with each successive year. And the things that we're going to focus in amongst quite a busy picture is really about genomics, and we'll also mention things like the genetic progress report and the centralized data repository during today's session. But why is it important really for us to increase the rate of genetic gain and breed better herds each year? It's because we know it makes such a fundamental difference on farm to our herds. And I think it's really useful to remind ourselves about how the decisions that we make from a genetic point of view make an impact on farm performance. In this graph, this is work that John Morton has done over a few years. And this looks at, on the horizontal axis, the balanced performance index of the cow's sire. And if we move to the right, the BPI of the sires are getting bigger. And then the vertical axis is the milk solid yield. Now, each of the lines represents a different feeding system, from low bale, so herds that are not using very much supplement, through to the total mixed ration and the hybrid systems. The lines at the top of the graph are more intensive feeding systems, feeding more concentrate, less time out grazing pasture. And the important point, I suppose, is that in each of those feeding systems, as we increase the balanced performance index of the cow's sire, we're seeing increased total milk solid yield. Now, production's only part of the story. A successful herd has cows that are producing well, but also lasting. And I think this is a nice illustration of, as we increase the balance performance index of the cow sires, we're also seeing that cows are lasting as long, if not longer, in our herds as we use higher BPI bulls and cows. So I think this is, if we know that cows are lasting longer and they're producing more, then we have more profitable cows to be able to add into our system. Now, the fundamental that contributes to that BPI are individual breeding values, and we know that they're used for a whole range of things. ABVs are useful to think about what bulls we might be selecting over our heifers. We can pick out traits like calving ease and things now, making sure that we're using the index that's appropriate for our farm business, looking at the breeding values, deciding which animals might be suitable for sex to be able to breed a great crop of heifers next season. Those ABVs are also useful to decide which bulls we might use over our cows. Again, making sure we're selecting the right index for our herd, checking the breeding values that are priority traits for our herd. We might use things like the new gestation length, for example, for later joinings. And it also helps us make sure that we're using a team of bulls in our program. But ABVs are not just about bulls. There's the opportunities to use ABVs in cows are growing very quickly. ABVs are helpful to kind of help us identify animals that we might not want to breed from. So, for example, low BPI cows or low BPI heifers, we might choose to breed them to beef and not keep replacements from those animals if we're in a position where we've got enough of heifers around to be able to do that. We can use ABVs to be able to allocate our semen more correctly, to choose the high BPI sires for some of the top and middle cows. We can use some sex semen, especially for early calved cows that are in good condition. And we might choose some cheaper semen or beef semen for the bottom cows that we don't want those replacements in our calf sheds next year. The focus of today, though, is how we use breeding values to select replacements by genotyping our heifers. And I think in this space, the power, the opportunities that come from genomically testing our heifers at an early age opens up an enormous range of opportunity for us. By using genomic breeding values, especially when we're collecting them at an early age, we can choose the best replacements for our herd. We can't afford the heifer rearing costs associated with rearing a poor animal. It's a costly exercise to rear those heifers. And so making sure we're choosing the best replacements to go into our herd makes a lot of sense. We want to be able to give our business options for growth. We might use genomics to accelerate the growth of our herd. We might use genomics to increase livestock revenue by identifying markets for individual types of animals and selling those animals early. We can prioritize our keepers, prioritize those heifers that we really want to have in our herd and be able to give them the resources so that they grow well and are really ready to take off as soon as they enter the herd. But all of this, these options really become more possible by having that genomic information available to us early as a calf. I think lastly, it gives us confidence to know who's who. When we're running significant numbers of cows, it's very easy for mismothering to occur and very easy to have the wrong calf connected to a cow. And genomic ABVs help to sort that out for us as well. Now, the secret really to genomic ABVs and what makes them particularly special is the reliability of this information that's now available at a very early age. This table shows us the change in reliability for a couple of different traits. If we compare a young heifer that we only know information about mom and dad, the reliability of the protein kilo ABV for that heifer might be about 40%. So yes, it gives us some information, but certainly there's lots of scope for that ABV to change as we add more information, and it only gives us a bare minimum amount of information. By adding a genomic, a genotype to that animal so that we have a genomic breeding value, that reliability moves up to 78% on average for Holsteins. So almost doubling the reliability of the genomic evaluation for that heifer. So at almost 80%, boy, you know, this is just a high quality piece of information that's able to be used at an early age. If we compare that to a cow that's been around a long time, so a cow that might have, you know, even been in the herd for 7 lactations, so she might be, you know, 9 or 10 years old, even at that stage, you know, the reliability of her information is only about 70%. So we're getting kind of more information about that animal right at a very early age from a genetic point of view, and really that opens the doors for making some good decisions with this early data. In terms of type and fertility, again, we're seeing significant lifts in the reliability of the breeding values that come from the genomic evaluation compared to the conventional parent average. On the jerseys, similar story. We see significant improvements in the reliability of the information by connecting a genotype to an animal and running that genomic evaluation. But I think the interesting thing is we know that the breeding values work. We know that it has a significant impact on the performance of cows. We know that genomics contributes by improving the reliability of the breeding value. But I think the bit that we want to you know, talk a little bit about today is really about how it's used on farm. And every herd has a different story. People are starting from different points. Their goals are different. And there are some stories about how genomics is being applied, and you can check out the DataGene website for some of those case studies. But today's case study is live and with us, and that's Sam. So Sam, we might pop you off mute if we can, so we can make sure we can hear you loud and clear. So Sam and Mark, you've got a busy family, Sam, 4 children and a big farm sort of near Colac. So there's lots on your plate, and we appreciate you joining us for this. This is a little picture of Sam's herd, just a segment from the genetic progress report for Sam's herd. Just to help those that haven't seen this sort of picture before, on the horizontal axis we have the year of birth of cows. So the earliest dot points on the left-hand side of the graph are cows in Sam's herd that were born in 2009, so quite a long time ago. And the ones on the right-hand side are calves. They're, you know, young stock that are at your place that were born in 2020, so the younger animals. And then the vertical axis is BPI, and we see that each year the average BPI of each cohort of animals is improving. To give you some sort of sense of where this sits sort of nationally, now Mark and Sam are sitting, I think, about 101 now in the country. So, you know, a very high ranking BPI herd in Australia. The train tracks that you see, the top line is the average of the top 10% in the country, and the bottom line is the average for Holstein herds in the country. So one thing I noticed, Sam, and you might kind of want to comment about this, is that rate of gain is lifting in your herd. Could you talk a little bit about some of the background to that, why that might be the case?
Yeah, sure. So hello everybody, and thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, I guess our farm is pretty typical of, well, has been pretty typical of a lot of farms around here. We started off as a Jersey base many moons ago. We've been in operation for coming up 100 years now on this particular farm. Prior to that, it was a farm in Melbourne, and they walked the cows from Ashburton all the way here to Larpent to start off the farm here. And up until about the 60s, it was predominantly a Jersey-based herd. And then There was the concerted effort to start changing over to black and whites. And then in the 80s, when Mark came on board, there was a real concerted effort to incorporate artificial insemination. And he went away at the time. That was when you had to go away and do a course to be able to even buy semen and all that sort of stuff. That was where sort of the AI really started to have an impact on the farm, was in probably about the mid-80s. I guess from that point going forward to about 2005, we really just muddled along. I guess, you know, there wasn't really a whole lot of choice. There certainly wasn't the choice that we've got now. And we were just sort of breeding cows that would put milk in the vat, pretty much. In 2005, we joined Holstein Australia and started classifying our animals and started getting a little bit more information about them. In 2015, we were approached to be part of the Improving Herds project, and that was where it really saw a good gain in our knowledge about our cows and also their future potential, because up until that point we were still relying very, very heavily on the opinions of others. So how people thought our cows looked. If they said they were a good cow, well, we had nothing else other than milk production figures to base that belief on, that it was a good cow, you know. So but going forward from 2015 and utilising genomics right across now we're doing it pretty much right across the herd, we've got a much better idea of exactly what our cows are doing and then how we manage those going forwards. And you can see on that particular graph, really there's quite a big increase from 2016 onwards, and that was where we were really utilising the genetic information that we were gaining about each of the animals. Yep. So the way that we do it is every year because there's a cost involved, of course. So what we do is every year we do all of the calves that are born in that particular year, and over the course of, you know, so many years, we will end up with all of the cows being genetically tested.
Great, thanks, Sam. That gives us a nice background, and you know, a change of policy and a change of approach, change in the use of technology has made a difference in terms of the rate of gain that is observed in your herd to date, which is nice to see. Now, Sam, this is the Genetic Futures Report, which is sort of, you know, starts with a genetic progress report, but adds a little bit more detail to it. It gives people the opportunity to look at traits, many more traits than was conventionally available with just the Genetic Progress Report. One of the things that it also shows is the differences in fat and protein between your high and your low BPI cows in your herd, and so the high group, this blue bar, they're yielding about 310 kilos compared to 287 in your lower group of BPI animals. And again, in terms of protein, 296 versus 258. So, it's around 60 kilos extra of milk solids per cow per year if we compare your high and your low in your own sort of herd. And lasting probably about 3 months or so longer, those high BPI cows. So this is sort of, just a little bit more insight into kind of some of the differences you might see in a particular herd. Yeah, which is nice. And interestingly, in terms of calving interval, there's probably about 10 days difference where those top ones are maybe 10 days a bit longer. But we've talked about fertility in your herd, and it's something that I think you've been talking about, an area that you're wanting to continue to see improvements in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that as a commercial farmer, because we don't sell our genetics, that's not our business. We're not in the business of showing cows. We're not in the business of selling embryos and all that sort of stuff. We're in the business of basically selling milk. So, and I guess that the ultimate the overarching breeding goal of having high productive cows hasn't largely changed, but it's being able to be refined a little bit more by utilising this exact information that you're looking at here on the screen right now. At the end of the day, we're paid on fat and protein. And so that has been a very big driving force at looking at the bulls that we've that are available to us through the Good Bulls Guide, and looking at which cows that we can put those over to actually drive those gains faster.
Yep.
So that's been certainly that area of the genomics that you're looking at there in the fat and the protein is definitely one of the areas in which we use the genomic information to drive our management, and longevity as well. I mean,
Yep.
you don't want to be spending all that money. And what I think the industry standard, and I know ours is still around about somewhere between $1,800 and $2,000 per calf to get them into the shed from a baby to a milker. You certainly don't want to be doing all of that to not have them hang around for a while. So,
for sure.
you know, there's a lot of time, effort, money, sweat, tears that is put into just getting him into the shed in the first part, and you don't want to break him down in the first 2 years.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And, you know, I mean, that's also got a little bit to do with the way that they're handled and managed by us and by staff, but it's also got a bit to do with the way that they can handle the environment as well. So definitely fat, protein, longevity are definitely key things that we look at in this report to drive our management.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. Now, when you're talking about genomically testing, you're testing all of your calves now. There's a number of ways to receive that information, and I've got some examples here, and we'll talk about some of the range of opportunities there are to kind of receive information back. But this is one way that you can see the results of genomic testing, which is through DataVat. DataVat's a website built from the centralized data repository, and this is a little glimpse of some of the animals that you might see when you pop into DataVat to have a look at your herd. Sam, there's some pretty handy heifers there. You know, BPI is sort of in the 300s, which is in that sort of elite category for sure. Now, DataVat gives us, you can sort of see just a long list of animals. I think there's about 1,200, almost 1,200 animals listed here for you. You also can use that same tool to kind of do some basic filtering using daughter fertility or mammary system, and you can sort of filter that list to kind of look at priority areas for you. You can pop that information out into a report if you wish. That gives you kind of a summary of the breeding values for those young calves, from which then you can decide which ones you want to breed in a particular way, or if you do decide you are not selling many calves, but for some others that might be an opportunity to be able to identify ones that you might want to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I can just jump in there and talk a little bit about, so the way that we utilise the information that comes through on the various reports, and we use, certainly we're using the DataVat, the information is coming from DataVat. We also use one of the other industry and other industry providers as well through the clarified system. But we, so what we do is that we utilise BPI as our index by which we rank everything against each other. And for the calves, so for the calves that are coming up for their first joining, what we do is we look at the BPI pretty much just on BPI, because we've got nothing else about the calf, about this young animal. We've got no great health herd records. We've got no milk, obviously no milk records or anything like that. So pretty much based on BPI is how we're going to manage her when it comes to joining. And we have a cutoff level by which we say anything that is above this BPI is going to get sex semen, and anything below this BPI is going to get conventional semen. And if they're really terrible, which we're moving to that point where they're not really that terrible, but if they are really terrible, well, then below that level, they'll get beef, for instance, because we don't want the genetics at all. But as we move forward, and that's really handy, because I think that gives you the confidence. And Michelle, I was talking to you yesterday about it gives you the confidence to be able to make those decisions about who gets what semen. Sex semen has come down in price significantly over the past 5 years, 8 years, but it's still expensive compared to conventional semen, and it also isn't as high fertility as conventional semen as well. And you don't want to be throwing good money after bad in utilising that. And there's all very good reasons for using it, and there's all very good reasons for using conventional as well. But I think you really need to know the animals that you're using to put that semen into. And we, once upon a time, and it probably still is, and I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but there was always that adage of put the sex semen over your young cows, and that's where you want to get the best bang for your buck. And that, whilst that's true in a sense, when you do your genetics and you look at the actual genetic profile of all of your young cows, some of those do not warrant having sex semen put into them, having that cost attributed to them. And so then that sort of has got a saving from your financial management point of view as well. Going forward, outside of the young stock, after they've had calves and they've been into the system and they're milking, and we've got some other herd health data, and we've got herd test figures and all that sort of stuff as well, we can then start to utilise some of those other areas to identify what particular bulls that we're going to use over them from the Good Bulls Guide. So, for instance, we might have two really old cows, for instance, and in fact, this year was a good example. We had a handful of cows from, I think, about 2000 and before 2016, and I had parent averaged BPI on those. And what I did was I looked at those, and one of them was brilliant. She was kicking goals. She was over so much BP. She was over 200 BPI. She was she'd never missed a beat in having a calf. She was good producer. She hadn't had very many health issues at all throughout her whole life. And there was another one who was also over 200 BPI, and she had mastitis a couple of times, and she didn't get into calf, 2 years in a row, first go, and all that sort of stuff. So one of them got sex semen, even though she was an old cow, and the other one didn't. So that sort of information that we're getting is giving us the ability to have confidence in knowing how we're going to actually handle some of those cows.
Yeah. So the information that you have as calves, it's highly reliable information, but as a cow ages, you do get that extra little bit on top that you can, fine tune even further, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell me just quickly about parentage, Sam, and how you use the parentage components that come from genomic testing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that as dairy farmers, you always think that you get it 100% right in the paddock when it's calving time. You always know exactly which calf goes with which cow. And not even, not that it's not close, but we have found that there's always going to be mix-ups. There's always going to be those times that you don't see the cow give birth, and there's cows give birth on top of one another, and they swap calves. And that's where some of that genetic stuff comes out. You can definitely work out exactly who is who. The other thing is it also goes right back to insemination too. We've had the issues where we are adamant. We know that a calf has come out of a particular mum because we may have pulled her, or we might have actually physically seen her give birth. And then when the genetics come back, it's not that bull that we know was put into that calf. And it was, when we've gone back, it's actually either a recording in the AI book, or a misrecording back into the computer, or it could be attributed to a bad straw pull. So that is great, because all of a sudden you've got the information on the animals going forward then, and you can make the changes that you need to do. But if you had gone along thinking that that particular calf was the thing that you thought it was, well, you might be really badly mistaken. You could be out by a factor of whatever. You could be thinking that you're operating with a 300 BPI calf, and you're only actually operating with 100 BPI calf. So it's got huge implications on the system.
That's great. Just a little with the data vat, you can, Sam, share your information now with trusted advisors as well to be able to have more detailed discussions with advisors. That feature's been turned on. So I think if we're thinking to other people who might not have had a go at genomically testing, there's probably some things to think about while you get started. And I think the first thing for me is just thinking about what you're going to do with the results, because that's really quite helpful to decide who you want to test and when you want to test. So the next question then is, what animals will you sample? Certainly testing calves gives you more opportunities to use the data. So I think there's really good value in testing calves early. So you've got the most opportunity to use that information. We've heard, it's quite convenient to tie this in with other tasks that you might be doing on a routine basis with the young calves, things like disbudding or a vaccination or a drench. There are lots of options in Australia in terms of choosing products. I've put a number on the screen, but there are a range of commercial options that are available, and it's great to have a chat with them to talk about the different offerings. You've got
Michelle, would you like me? Sorry, Michelle, would you like me to talk about our experiences with the actual physical testing part?
Yeah, sure. Some practical do's and don'ts. Any tricks that you've got that have worked for you, Sam?
Yeah, sure. So we started doing our sampling via pulling tail hairs on the animals, and now we actually do the ear notching. When we were doing the tail hair sampling, we found that there was a greater margin for error for us when we were doing that. There was a greater, if you are doing your hair sample pulls or your ear notching and you're then putting them all in to be done as a batch, if you leave the tail hairs, and this is what we found, if you leave the tail hairs too long and there is some sort of contaminant on the actual sample, the chances that they're going to be DNA testing bacteria or grass or
not what you're intending
else, is probably just as high as they're going to be testing your samples, your hair samples as well. And we found that we were actually getting a number of requests for resampling animals. It was a task. Doing the hair pulls, we found nobody wanted to do it with us, so it just happened to be one of the things that when the calves got brought in, then we're all together and we'll do the tail samples. By that stage, sometimes they were spring grass growth had come through and they were pretty pooey, and that was an issue.
That's not fun either.
If you're outsourcing the sampling, you've got to make sure that the people know exactly how to do it. I said to Michelle yesterday, I actually outsourced to one of our staff member to do about 40 calves for me, and when all the samples came back, there was not one single hair follicle on the samples, and I had to go back and redo all of the samples again. With the ear notching, it's almost foolproof. If you can put in a ear tag in a calf, you can take a good clean ear sample for genetics. And we just, as Michelle said, we tie that in with other jobs that we're doing. So when we're actually doing dehorning, we knock all of our calves out, and then the dehorner goes around, he does all of the dehorning, and then we just follow him up with doing the ear sample notch for the genetics, and then into that hole goes the NLIS tag, and then into the other ear goes a second matched ear tag number as well. So that's how we do it, and it's it's easy, it's quick, and you can send those samples off as you do them then.
Yeah, sounds great. Now, if you haven't had a go at this before, there are some great resources, some videos online that show you how to do this as well. So, and if you need some help, just give us a call and we can point you in the right direction. The service providers are also very good at providing that practical support information to get you started. And the last thing to consider is you will just need some identification on those calves as well, just to make sure we can link the animal with the genotype. Sorry, I just lost my. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so in terms of accessing the results, sorry about that, guys. So just a little interruption. So we've talked a little bit about DataVat, but the service providers have a variety of reporting mechanisms, dashboards and tools available for you to be able to give you some a nice range of reports and things that help you view those results, look at individual animals and look at groups of animals to both measure performance over time and identify animals that you want to select for either specific breedings or for selling. Just in terms of some of the, the ways that we use those results, I think, selecting replacements is really, a first place to start. Helps us choose the best replacements for our herd. And as I mentioned before, the genomic evaluations give us business options to grow the herd, to increase livestock revenue, and to prioritize those keepers. And as Sam mentioned, it's good to have that confidence to know who's who in the herd and have that parentage sort of sorted, and also manage our semen selection nicely and be planned about that. Now, if you're looking for more information about genomic testing, certainly talk to the genomic service providers or your herd improvement service providers. ReproRight trained advisors are also a great source. You can flick on to DataGene. There's a number of resources there available to you, and there's some contact details there if you want some to have a chat or send an email. So just in summary, I think genetic choices, they really do make a difference. It's important to make a good decision every time. Genomics means a significant improvement in the reliability of that genetic information that's available to you at an early age to select the best replacements for your herd. And I'd just like to, reflect on, this is really a team game. We are fortunate in Australia to have some terrific researchers at Dairy Bio and Agriculture Victoria, funded by Dairy Australia and the Gardner Foundation, that have contributed to the development of genomics and the development of traits over time. But that can't happen without the great support of data suppliers, farmers, breed organizations, genomic service providers, software providers, herd test centers, bull companies, who all contribute to data and make this job work. So I know we've run a little bit over time, folks. I'm going to end the slideshow and see if we've got time for a couple of quick questions. Leanne will keep me on track to know if we've got the opportunity to ask a couple or not.
Yes, I think we've got a bit of time, and everybody is welcome to unmute and turn their cameras on if they'd like. While you're doing that, I'll pass on one question that we've got from Stephanie. Do you need to know who the parents are to test, or do you just need a calf ID? What if you have a herd with limited pedigree information?
I think we start with what we've got. So if you don't have the parents, let's just start. The genomic service will allocate parents if the parents are known. So if the herd, for example, has been an AI herd, and it's been using AI sires, there's a pretty good chance the system's going to pick up on the sires of those calves. Now, the dams will be unknown if that herd hasn't been genomically testing before, so it won't be able to discover the dams. Now, that's in contrast to Sam's herd, where she's been testing for a few years and will be able to check the parentage of the dams as well. So if we don't have any information, we can still start. If you do have information, that's even better. But we should still try and genomically test even if the parents are unknown. The one proviso to that is the breeds that we're working with are Holstein and Jersey at this point. Red breeds will be here soon, and crossbreeds as well. But we don't offer valuations for, for Guernsey or for Brown Swiss, some of the smaller breeds yet. So as long as we're working with perhaps those, the three more populous breeds in the country, then we can give that a start, even if we don't know the parents.
And just on that too, Michelle, if I can add that, particularly Sam, you've had great success. You've genotyped your bulls as well, so your natural service bulls. So it not only gives you an idea what bulls you may use, but we can also accurately determine which calf your natural bull side as compared to AI too, isn't it?
Great.
Yeah,
thanks for
yeah,
that.
that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. If that's the area that you want to go in breeding your own bulls for your own use, for paddock bulls, so you don't lose that genetic information, or if you're, and you're registering through Holstein Australia or Jersey Australia, you certainly don't want to go backwards in your classification, like your appendix status. So by knowing those bulls, by genetically testing the bulls, then you know exactly who's covering who. Yeah.
And particularly too, the point was made that if you're using bulls on heifers, by genomically testing your bull, we actually give you calving ease and gestation length on that bull as well. So you can avoid any catastrophic disaster by actually relying on that before the bull actually gets to the paddock.
Yeah, great. Bruce has asked, can we determine the dam sire? Bruce, not at this stage, but watch this space. We're working with Dairy Australia closely on a project called Accelerating Heifer Genomics. And one of the features that we want to introduce as part of that is determining the dam sire, and maybe even a little further out than that. So watch this space, Bruce, for some increase in capacity to detect more members in a pedigree.
Can I also just say, just while there's some questions maybe still coming in, can I just say also that we've seen some really fantastic results over a very short period of time, and Peter can probably attest to this as well. We've only really been doing this ourselves. We were involved in improving herds in the 2015 drop, 2015 heifers, but ourselves, we've been doing it since 2016. So we've only been doing it for 4 years or so. Now, I just did a quick report this morning on our 2020 calves. So this lot of calves that have still got to have this, they've all been sampled and they're just about ready to go in. Thanks, COVID, that put me right behind on everything. But based on my the parent average BPI that I know, because most of the dams have been sampled, so I know what they are, doing a parent average BPI, for the 2020 calves, we've now only got 5 of those calves that are under 100 BPI, only 5 of them out of 101 calves. And of all of that drop, there's 200 of them, 59 of them are over 200 BPI, and of the ones that are over 250, there's 28 out of the 100. So nearly a quarter of that drop is over 250, and there's probably, I reckon, I'd say probably about 8 or 10 that are over 300. So that's really escalated, because if we were back when we started, we were saying, oh, we'll put sex semen into anything that is BPI of 60 and above. Now I'm selling 60 and above, like anything that's BPI 60. I'm putting beef into them. They're not getting, and we were putting sex semen into those. So now my cutoff is, I think this year it was 180 BPI. They would even consider getting sex. Next year it will probably be 250. I'd say 250. Yeah. So you can get a really good gain in not a very long period of time.
And a large part of that, Sam, is that you not only top bulls, but you've actually stopped breeding from your bottom cows now for replacements, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, and then that's given us as a business another way of managing our herd. So rather than putting all of our eggs into the one basket, as you know, Pete, and getting all of our income from milk, now instead of breeding everything because we just want cows milking, what we do now is we have a look at them and say, well, we want to milk. Yeah, that's going to be our primary source of income. That's not going to change. But for the cows that we don't want their genetics, they're costing us they might be costing us money, they're costing us time and all that sort of stuff. Let's put beef into those and let's take advantage of the really good beef market at the point in time. If you're reading the Weekly Times and the cents per kilo of beef, let's take some advantage of some of those other markets that can also help prop up our business as well. So we're getting a better herd genomically, but we're also bettering our overall business by sort of, not having so much of a monoculture of income just tied to milk. We're able to sort of spread our risk a lot better. And that's all to do with the fact that we're genomically testing our cows.
Sam, I think that's a fantastic place to end it. I couldn't conclude any better than that. Look, thanks very much, guys, for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed, thinking a little bit more about genomic testing and the opportunities that presents. Thanks very much, Sam, for joining us. It's been wonderful to have your practical viewpoint and advice in your story. It's been really terrific. Have a fantastic day, everyone, and look forward to catching up with you at the next Breeding Briefs webinar. So stay tuned on Facebook and email to watch for details. Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.
The next one's in a fortnight.
Oh, thanks, Leanne. Sorry. Next one's in a fortnight.
I think it's heat tolerance from memory.
Excellent. All just in time for the warming up of the weather. Yeah. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks a lot. Bye.